The train was still running on schedule when they found her in the Salt Lake, dressed like she'd stepped out for the evening. And the first person to identify her gave a name that didn't match any missing woman. By the end, you'll understand how a single ride on the Metropolitan line turned into a carefully staged death, who benefited from the confusion around her identity, and which overlooked detail most likely points to the killer. Because if her name was wrong, her life could be erased twice, first by murder, then by a system that files women away as unclaimed, while the person who put her there keeps riding the same line home. Who was the lady in the lake of salt, and who worked so hard to make sure nobody could prove it? The man on the platform thinks he has seen it all. The late train. The impaired by then the shout. Not loud at first, more like a warning that someone doesn't know they should stop. A woman in a light coat steps beyond the yellow line. A second later, she is down on the track bed. The headlights swinging. The driver hits the brakes. The sound is a long, awful scrape that seems to go on too long to be real. People freeze. Someone runs to the edge and looks down. And then comes the detail that makes the air change. The woman is not just injured, she is already arranged. Her limbs are positioned in a way that does not match her fall. Her face is turned away. And scattered around her, like grit at the edge of a tide line, are pale crystals. Salt. On an underground railway, miles from the sea, in the first minutes, no one calls it murder. They call it an accident. They call it a tragedy. But one officer, leaning into the dark with a torch, sees something else. He sees that the salt is not random. It has been placed, so the question begins at the trackbed, in the stale heat under the London streets. How does a woman end up dead on the Metropolitan line, with salt sprinkled around her like a ritual? And who wanted the first story to be an accident? By morning, the station is open again. Commuters step around the memory of the night before as if the tiles can be wiped clean. But the incident report is not clean. It has gaps. It has contradictions. The woman has no immediate identification. No purse, no phone, no Oyster card, no handbag even. Only a coat with a torn label. In her pocket, a folded paper that has been handled many times. It is not a note. It is a ticket stub. An old one. From a different line. A different day. The first detective on the case doesn't look for a dramatic motive. He looks for the simple thing. Who is she? He starts where everyone starts. Missing persons. The files are thick. London is big. People disappear in ways that are not crimes, but the salt is a problem. Salt suggests intention. It suggests time spent at the scene. It suggests someone was calm enough to do something unnecessary. The CCTV is requested. And this is where the story takes its first sharp turn. The camera that should cover the platform is working. The camera that should cover the stairs is working. But the camera that should cover the precise section where she went down is not. Not broken. Not blurred. Just looping. Repeating the same empty seconds. A clean absence. A disappearance inside a system designed to record everything. And when investigators ask for station logs, they find another irregularity. A maintenance entry. A work order for that camera. Dated 3 days before the death. Signed off no parts replaced, no follow-up. So now the question is not only who she was, it is who knew where she would be, who knew which camera to silence, and who had the authority to make that silence look routine. The Metropolitan line has a personality. It is older than most of the city's modern habits. It runs through clean, bright stations and then out toward places with trees and quiet drives. It connects money and movement. It also connects anonymity, because the same carriage can hold a banker, a cleaner, a student, and someone who is not meant to be seen. Investigators reconstruct the woman's last hour with what they can. A witness remembers her at the far end of the platform. Another remembers the coat. A third remembers the smell. Not perfume, something like damp stone, like a cellar. And then there is a small, stubborn fact. The salt is not table salt. It is coarse, industrial, the kind used to melt ice, or the kind used to melt ice, or the kind used in food processing, or the kind used in aquariums. The lab can't tell you who carried it, but it can tell you what it is. The body is taken for post-mortem. The pathologist does not begin with poetry. He begins with measurements. Bruises. A scrape pattern, a fracture that does not match the story of a simple drop, and a detail that turns accident into something else. There is a mark on the wrist, not from the track, not from a fall. A banded impression. As if something tight had been there, as if she had been restrained. If she was restrained, she did not step off the platform on her own. If she did not step off on her own, someone brought her there. And if someone brought her there, the platform is not the beginning. It is the end. So where is the beginning? Where was she held, and by whom, before the Metropolitan line ever saw her? Her body wasn't just dumped. It was arranged, as if someone wanted the lake to be the story. So what was the real crime scene? The water? Or the Metropolitan line itself? Pause the lake for a second, because the strangest clue wasn't in the water at all. It was on the train. And it shouldn't exist. The name comes late. Not from a wallet, not from a friend calling in panic. It comes from fingerprints. A match in a database that is not supposed to be used for everyday identification. Because the woman has been processed before. Not for violence, for protest. Years earlier, she had been arrested at a demonstration. Released. No conviction. But her prints stayed. Her name is given to the detectives with the clipped certainty of a computer result. And suddenly, she becomes a person again. She has an address, a workplace history, a GP, a circle, and a gap. Because no one reported her missing. Not immediately, not at all, at first. When police go to her flat, the neighbor says she thought she'd gone away. When police go to her workplace, they find she hadn't been in for days. But the workplace didn't call. They assumed she was quitting, or sick, or unreliable. It is an ordinary kind of neglect. The kind that lets people vanish without a sound. In her flat, there is no sign of a struggle, no broken door, no scattered drawers, but there is a smell, a faint sharpness in the kitchen. And in the sink, as if someone washed their hands there again and again, there is residue, pale grit, salt. It is in the drain trap. It is on the rim of the basin. And it is inside a dish towel, stiffened in one corner. Now the salt is no longer just at the track. It follows her. It sits inside her private space. Which means someone brought it in. Or she did. Investigators stand in that quiet kitchen and feel the case shift. If the salt was in her home, was she targeted there first? Or did she bring it in herself as part of something no one else understood? And if she did, why did it end with her body on the rails? Quick recap. Here's what we know so far, and the one detail that still doesn't fit. The timeline says she couldn't have reached the lake without being seen, yet no one remembers her. Who benefits when a commuter vanishes into the blind spots between stations? The detectives start with the simplest human question. Who last saw her alive? Friends describe a woman who could be intense, not cruel, not volatile, but fixed. She believed in causes. She believed in patterns. She believed that the city was full of hidden systems. Some people smiled at that. Some people worried. In the weeks before her death, she had been speaking about something she called the lake. Not a real lake. A phrase. A place in her mind, maybe, or a name for a group. Or a name for a fear. She told one friend she felt watched. She told another friend she thought someone had been in her flat. No one called police. Because fear is common. Because London is loud. Because paranoia is a word people use too quickly when they don't want to be responsible. The case file fills with small stories. A man in a grey jacket who stood outside her building too often. A new email address that sent her messages without names. A phone call that dropped when she answered. And a final detail. She had started going to meetings, not therapy, not a club. A quiet group that met in a rented room above a shop. No signs outside, no webpage, just a time and a door. She called it a cleansing circle. The detectives find the shop. They find the upstairs room, but the owner says the renter stopped paying. He doesn't have a name. He has cash. He has a face he can't quite recall. And the room itself has been emptied. No chairs, no candles, no papers. Only a faint white line on the floor, like salt that has been swept up. Was she drawn into a group that used salt like a symbol? Or was someone imitating a ritual to hide a simpler crime? And if there was a circle, who was standing in it with her? Police circulated description and tips poured in, then suddenly stopped. What piece of information was quietly changed that made witnesses doubt what they saw? If you want to know how someone dies, you look at how they lived. The detectives pull her digital life apart. Emails, travel history, card transactions. What they find is both ordinary and strange. She bought groceries. She topped up her travel card. She paid rent. Then, 3 days before the death, the pattern breaks. Cash withdrawals. Smaller than you'd expect for someone running away. Larger than you'd expect for someone staying in. Enough for meetings. Enough for taxes. Enough to avoid leaving a trail. There is also a purchase made online, not delivered. Collected. From a shop that sells aquarium supplies. The item, marine salt. Coarse. Industrial. The same type found at the track. And it was collected under her name. Now the case grows teeth, because if she collected it, she was either involved in the symbolism, or someone used her identity, or someone forced her to do it. Police go to the aquarium shop. There is CCTV. There is a record of the time. The person in the video is wearing her coat, the face is half hidden. The posture is wrong. not her. A different gait. A different weight. Someone has her coat. Someone is using her name. Someone is comfortable walking around London as her. And now, another issue. The day of the collection. A station card top-up happens. At a machine. At a station on the Metropolitan line. A station that isn't near her home. It is near something else. A depot. A service entrance. A place most passengers never see. Why would her card be used near a depot? Why would someone wearing her coat be buying marine salt? And if someone was impersonating her, what else did they do in her name before they put her on the tracks? One man swore he spoke to her on the platform, but his details match a different night entirely. Was he mistaken? Or rehearsed? Now reverse it. Assume she wasn't the target, then ask why the wrong woman ends up stage like a message. There is a phrase the police use when the case starts to feel contaminated. They call it a closed world. A world with its own rules, its own loyalties, its own ways of making problems disappear. The railway can be a closed world, not the passengers. The contractors, the people who know the side doors, the people who can walk into a station in a high-vis jacket and become invisible. Investigators begin speaking to station employees. They speak to drivers. They speak to cleaners. They speak to maintenance. Most are cooperative. Most are horrified. But there are moments, pauses, eyes that drop, words that tighten. One worker says something small that matters. He says he saw a woman on the platform earlier that night. Not the victim. A different woman. Older. Not the victim. A different woman. Older, hair pinned back, holding a paper bag. He remembers because she looked at him as if she knew him, as if she expected him to look away. And he did. Because in a closed world, you learn what not to see. A second worker mentions the maintenance log, the one that silenced the camera. He says the signature is real, but the job number is wrong. It belongs to a different ticket, a different repair. Meaning, someone copied a format. Someone who knows how the paperwork works. Someone inside. Then there is the salt. A cleaner says they have seen salt before. Not like this. But near the service corridors, sprinkled in small lines, as if someone was marking a path. The detective asks the question that hangs over all of it. Is the railway being used as a stage, or is it being used as a tool by someone who knows it intimately? And if there is someone inside the system, how many doors did they open to bring her to that track bed? The post-mortem brings the story back to the body, because the body keeps its own timeline. The pathologist finds abrasions on her knees, small, as if she had been made to kneel. He finds bruising along the upper arms, finger-shaped. Restraint again. He finds traces under her nails. A fiber, not from her coat, not from the platform. A synthetic weave. The kind used in cheap gloves. And then the cause of death is made clear. It is not the impact, not entirely. There is evidence of drowning, water in the lungs, not the clean water you'd expect from a bath. Something heavier, mineral-rich. And salt, not in the way you get from tears, not in the way you get from the sea. Salt, in a concentration that suggests something deliberate. A solution, a brine. A liquid that can hold a body. A liquid that can sting. A liquid that can preserve. Now the title that newspapers will later love starts to take shape. The Lady in the Lake of Salt. But it isn't a lake. Not in London. Not in the underground. So investigators ask an ugly question. Was she drowned before she ever reached the station? Was she kept in salt water to change the evidence? To slow decay? To confuse time of death? If so, who has access to that much salt and that much water? And where in this city could you hide a salt lake big enough to hold a person? Quick recap. Here's what we know so far, and the one detail that still doesn't fit. There was no panic call, no struggle reported, no scream heard over the rails. How do you kill someone in a city of commuters without making a sound anyone admits to hearing? When police search for a hidden place, they look for industrial spaces. They look for units, garages, basements, workshops, anywhere you can make noise without neighbors asking questions. They also look for water, because water leaves stains, water leaves mold, water leaves plumbing. They trace her movements in the last week, and they trace the movements of the people around her. A name rises. A man she dated briefly, not dramatic, not long, but recent enough to leave a key. A spare, a copy. He works in logistics. He has access to vans. He has access to storage. He says they ended amicably. He says he hasn't seen her. He says he was at home that night. But his phone data places him near the depot station, near the card top-up, near the place her identity was used. Police search his unit. They find plastic sheeting. They find a large, empty storage tub. They find a drain hose. All of it explainable. All of it plausible. Then they find the one thing that doesn't belong. A paper bag, aquarium shop logo, and inside it, coarse salt crystals stuck to damp paper. The man says he keeps fish. He says it's for a tank, but there is no tank. There is no pump. There is no filter. Just salt. And a tub big enough to bend a body into. Police take him in. They ask him about the coat. He says he's never touched it. They ask him about the wrist mark. He looks away. Not guilty. Not innocent. Just aware. But the case is not clean. Because the timeline still doesn't fit. Because the drowning evidence suggests she was in brine. And the unit doesn't look like a place where you'd make brine and keep it. So the question becomes sharper. Is this man the killer, or is he only the visible piece of something larger, something that still has a reason to hide? A small personal item should have named her instantly, but it led investigators to a dead end. Why would a victim carry something that points away from her real life? Forget suspects, follow the paperwork, because one missing form tells you exactly who had the power to make her disappear. An interrogation room is not a place for truth, it is a place for pressure. The detectives press him with facts, phone pings, the bag, the tub. He pushes back with explanations. A friend borrowed the van. He was near the depot because he took a shortcut. The salt is old. He bought it months ago. Then they show him the CCTV still. The figure wearing her coat. He studies it. And he says something that surprises everyone. He says it isn't him. He says he knows who it is. Not by face, by posture, by the way the shoulders sit. He names a woman, a colleague, someone from his workplace, someone who once joked about how easy it is to become someone else in London. Police don't like sudden gifts. They feel like traps. But they follow the lead. The colleague exists. And she has something else. A second job. Part-time. Cleaning contracts. Including rail properties. Including access points that are not on passenger maps. Her record is unremarkable. No violence. No arrests. But there are strange notes in her HR file. Conflicts. Complaints. A pattern of people saying they felt watched around her, felt followed, felt singled out. Police bring her in. She sits very still. She answers softly. She says she never met the victim. She says she has never been to an aquarium shop. She says she doesn't like the underground. She says she gets headaches. But when the detective mentions salt, her eyes flick. Just once. A tiny reaction. Then she returns to calm. It is the calm of someone who has rehearsed, or the calm of someone who believes they are untouchable. So the investigation widens, not outward, inward, into connections, into access, into the question that keeps coming back. If someone can silence a camera and move unseen through service corridors, how many people would have to cooperate for that to happen? The detectives go back to the victim's messages. They search for any contact with the colleague's name. Nothing. No texts, no emails, no social links. So they look for indirect contact. A shared place, a shared event, a shared cause. They find it in the protest record. Years ago, at that demonstration, there was a countergroup. Not official, not police. People who filmed faces. People who shouted names. People who believed they were defending something. The colleague was there, not arrested, not charged, but captured in the background of footage, standing close, watching. As if she came to take something away. The victim, friends say, never forgot that day. She said she received messages afterward. Strange ones. Not threats, more like warnings dressed as advice. Stay pure. Stay clean. Don't contaminate the city. At the time, everyone rolled their eyes. Now, the salt feels like those words made physical. Clean. Pure. Cleansing. The circle. The white lines on a floor. Police ask the colleague where she was on the night of the death. She gives an alibi. A late shift. A friend's flat. A bus ride home. Some of it checks out. Some of it doesn't. A gap of 40 minutes. A gap right when the victim vanishes from any reliable trace. And then, one more thing. A storage unit in her name, paid in cash, rented only a month. The kind of rental you take when you plan to leave, or when you plan to hide something. They get a warrant, they open the door. Inside, there is no body, no obvious weapon. But there is a smell, sharp, mineral. Like the sea without the air, and on the concrete floor, a ring stain. A circle, as if a large container sat there and leaked, so now the brine has a possible home, but the container is gone. The question becomes urgent. Where did it go? And was it emptied before police arrived, or because someone knew they were coming? The first official theory sounded tidy until the water proved it couldn't work that way. If the lake didn't take her life, what did? A murder case is often solved by what a suspect can't help doing. Returning to a place. Calling someone. Checking the news too many times. In this case, it might be paperwork. Because the camera loop was not an accident. It was a decision. Police bring in a specialist, someone who knows rail CCTV systems. not the public-facing feeds, the internal ones. He explains something simple. You don't silence a camera by tapping a button. You need access, you need credentials, or you need the physical cabinet. And that cabinet is behind a locked door, a door that logs entries. If it's used properly, they pull the access logs. Most entries are normal. Then, on the night of the death, an entry appears that shouldn't, a staff card used at a time it wasn't scheduled. A card belonging to someone who insists they were asleep. A card belonging to a junior technician. When police interview him, he looks terrified. Not guilty, terrified. Afraid, terrified. He says he lent his card, just once, to someone senior. Someone who said it was urgent. Someone who said it would be blamed on him if he refused. He won't name them. Not at first. Then, after hours, he does. A supervisor. A man with years on the system. A man who knows where the blind spots are. A man who also, it turns out, once worked as a contractor for the same logistics company as the victim's ex. Now the closed world tightens. People who should not be connected are connected, not by friendship, by overlapping jobs, by side contracts, by favors, by mutual silence. The detectives see a network, not necessarily a conspiracy, but a chain. And a chain is enough, because in a chain you only need one link to hold. So the question is no longer whether the camera was silenced, it is why. What was so important to hide on that platform that someone risked their career to erase it? Quick recap. Here's what we know so far. And the one detail that still doesn't fit. A second identity surfaced, and it came with a circle of people who all claimed they barely knew her. Why do the least involved witnesses always share the most identical story? One detail sounds too small to matter until you realize it could only be known by someone who'd done this route before. At this point in an investigation, the story that the public knows splits from the story police are building. Newspapers have their headline, "The Lady in the Lake of Salt," "The Underground Ritual," "The Eerie Crystals." But police don't chase eeriness, they chase logistics. How do you move a body? How do you move a container? How do you do it without being seen? They look again at the Metropolitan line's service routes, the corridors behind the stations, the doors marked staff only, the lifts used for equipment. It turns out you can move a lot through those spaces, if you belong, or if you can look like you belong. The supervisor is brought in. He is careful. He is polite. He says he doesn't remember that night. He says the junior technician is confused. He says he would never borrow a card. But his phone is a problem. It connects to a mast near the station at the time. He claims he was driving past. He claims he was nowhere near the cabinet. Then comes a quieter piece of evidence. His boots, seized from his locker. The tread holds pale crystals, coarse. And when tested, they match the aquarium salt. Not unique, not conclusive. But they are there, in the grooves, as if he walked through spilled salt and didn't notice, or noticed and didn't care. Police search his home. They find nothing dramatic, no shrine, no notebook of victims. But they find a receipt for plastic sheeting, and another receipt for a large container, the kind used to store liquids. And the date is close. Too close. The detectives now have 3 strands. The ex with access to vans. The colleague with the storage unit stain. The supervisor with the camera access. 3 people, 1 dead woman, and 1 substance that keeps appearing like a signature. Salt. So here is the question. Is salt the signature of one killer? Or the shared symbol of a group that believed it had the right to cleanse someone from the city? The detectives choose pressure over patience. They separate their suspects. They compare statements. They wait for the first crack. It does not come as a confession. It comes as anger. The ex demands to know why he is being treated like a monster. He says he loved her. Then, without being asked, he says he didn't kill her. He says someone else did. Someone who thought she was dirty. Someone who used words like purity. He says he heard those words at work. From the colleague, from a small group that met after hours. He calls them a wellness circle. He calls them harmless. Then he stops. Because he realizes what he just admitted. A group. A circle. A meeting. And suddenly the upstairs room above the shop makes sense. Not random, not imaginary, a real gathering. The ex says the victim came once, just once. He says he brought her. He says she wanted to understand him. He says she wanted to see why his new friends mattered. He says she laughed at it, not cruelly, but with disbelief. He says after that night, things changed. He says the colleague began asking questions about her. Where she lived, where she worked, what she believed. He says he told her to stop. He says he regrets not reporting it. Police ask him about the brine. He goes quiet. He says the group talked about cleansing, about salt baths, about purging toxins, about washing away contamination. He says he thought it was metaphor. He says he never imagined a tub, never imagined drowning, but the detectives hear something else. Knowledge. Not after the fact. Knowledge of the idea. So now the investigation pivots. If this circle existed, if it preached cleansing, and if the victim walked in and laughed, what did they decide she deserved, and did the ex bring her into danger without realizing? Or did he deliver her on purpose? Someone reported seeing a couple arguing near the line, and the report was filed, then buried. Who decided that lead was too dangerous to follow? Police try to find other members. This is where cases like this get hard, because informal groups don't keep rosters, they keep secrets. They communicate in disappearing messages. They pay in cash. But people talk. Someone always talks. A former attendee comes forward, not proud, shaken. He says the circle began as wellness, breathing, cold water, simple rules. Then it shifted. The leader began speaking about contamination, about the city being sick, about certain people carrying rot. The language got darker. The salt stopped being symbolic. It became a tool, a boundary, a line you don't cross, a line that protects the pure from the impure. The witness says he left when the group began talking about punishments. Not legal, spiritual, the kind you can justify to yourself. He doesn't know the victim. But he remembers a night when the leader mentioned a woman who mocked them. A woman who needed to be shown. A woman who would be washed clean. He says the leader was careful, never used a full name, but he remembers a detail. The leader referred to the underground, called it the artery, called it the place where the city's sickness travels. He said cleansing there would be powerful, public, unavoidable. Police ask who the leader was. The witness hesitates. Then he says it. Not the colleague, not the ex, not the supervisor. Someone else. A man who presented himself as a healer. A man who rented rooms and took cash. A man who moved around. A man whose real employment, according to the witness, was rail contracting. Now the circle has a face, but it also has mobility. And that means escape. So the question becomes immediate. If the leader is real, where is he now? And how many people is he still controlling from the shadows? Her clothing suggested money, but her pockets suggested haste. Was she dressed for an appointment, or dressed by someone else afterward? Listen closely. The helpful witness gives the same sentence twice, and that repetition is where the lie lives. Police search for the leader like they search for any suspect. Addresses, contracts, bank accounts, vehicles. But he is the kind of man who leaves little behind. Cash, short rentals, prepaid phones. He exists in gaps. Still, the city keeps records. A rail contractor has to sign in. A rail contractor has to be on a list. A rail contractor has to be paid. They find a name that matches the description. Not common, not rare, enough to hide. They find his last known address. An unremarkable flat. Inside, it is almost empty. A mattress. A kettle. No photos, no books. But in the bathroom, there is a ring of dried mineral around the tub. White crust. Salt line. And on the tile floor, faint marks. Drag marks. As if something heavy was moved, the neighbors report hearing water late at night. For hours. Then silence. Police trace his movements through transport data where they can, a ticket purchased with cash at a station, a sighting from a bus driver, a CCTV glimpse near a canal. Then nothing. The detectives sit with the reality. If he planned this, he planned an exit. And the more they look, the more the murder feels staged. The salt, the camera, the track bed. It feels designed to draw eyes, to create fear, to create myth. So they ask another question. If the Metropolitan line scene was theatre, what was the real purpose? Was it to hide a drowning? Or to send a message? And if it was a message, who was it meant for? Quick recap. Here's what we know so far. And the one detail that still doesn't fit. The victim's friends feel the message, even if they can't name it. They stop taking the same routes. They check behind them in reflections. They jump at unknown numbers. Police set up protection. They also set a trap. They release a controlled detail to the press, not the truth. A lure. They hint that the salt may have come from a specific supplier. They hint that they are looking at aquarium shops. They want the killer to react, because killers who stage scenes often crave control. They want to know what police know. They want to adjust the story. Days pass. Then, at an aquarium supplier outside London, a man pays cash for marine salt. A lot of it. Too much for a tank. The clerk is uneasy, because the man is calm, because he asks about solubility, because he asks how long it takes to reach certain concentrations. The clerk calls the number. Police left. A team moves. But the man is gone. Only the receipt remains. And CCTV, a clear face, the leader. Now police know he is still in the country, still moving, still buying salt, still thinking in concentrations. The detectives realize something else. He is not only cleaning after the past, he is preparing for another act, for another cleansing. And the Metropolitan line death may not have been an ending. It may have been a beginning. So the question becomes the one that chills every investigator. If he is buying salt again, who is the next person he plans to wash away? A witness placed a distinctive vehicle near the lake, and the registration should have been easy. So why does the record for that plate number go missing at the exact right moment? Police re-interview the colleague. This time, they don't ask about Salt. They ask about him, the leader. She stiffens. Then she smiles. It is brief. It is not warmth. It is allegiance. She says she hasn't seen him in months. She says he helped her once. He helped her feel clean. He helped her feel safe. The detective hears the language and understands. This isn't just a group, it is a belief. Belief makes people do things they would never do for money. Belief makes them lie with a straight face. The colleague denies murder. But she admits something else. She says the victim came to a meeting. She says the victim was disrespectful. She says the victim was disrespectful. She says the kind of laughter is violence. Then she stops, realizing she has revealed her emotional motive. Police press. They ask about the storage unit. She says it was for cleaning supplies. They ask about the stain. She says a container leaked. They ask what was in it. She says a container leaked. They ask what was in it. She says water. Just water. The detective asks a final question. Why rent a storage unit for water? And why pay cash? A calm begins to crack. Not into confession, into blame. She says the leader told her the victim needed cleansing. She says she did not know it would go that far. She says the leader said the underground would do the rest, that the rails would make it look like an accident, that the city would swallow it. Now police have something close to a narrative. Not the whole truth, but a shape. A drowning. A transport, a staging, a silenced camera, and people playing roles. But there is still a missing piece. Where did the supervisor fit? Was he an ideologue, a helper, or simply a man paid to look away? And if he was paid, who paid him? The Metropolitan line has rules, last trains, staff routines, camera angles, and the killer behaved like someone who knew them. Was this crime planned by a stranger or by a regular? If you think the lake is the weapon, you're already off by one step, because the real weapon was time, and someone controlled it. Money leaves tracks even when people try not to. Investigators examine the supervisor's finances. His salary is steady. His bills are ordinary. Then, 2 weeks before the death, there is cash. Unexplained, not a fortune. But enough to matter. Not a fortune. But enough to matter. Enough to make someone bend. He says it was a loan from family. The family denies it. He says it was savings. The bank history says otherwise. Then, in his phone, a message thread. Short, encrypted app. But a notification preview remains. 2 words, camera sorted. The sender is saved under a single letter. Not a name, just a letter. Police try to map that letter to contacts. They can't, but they can map the time. Minutes after the camera began looping. Minutes before the victim went down. The supervisor insists he didn't touch the system. He says he was asked. He says he was pressured. He says he thought it was about fare evasion, about embarrassment, about a colleague's mistake. He says he didn't think someone would die. He says he didn't know a woman was involved. Detectives have heard this before. The lie of the small crime. The idea that you can help with a little wrongdoing and still be a good person. But the salt is not small. The drowned lungs are not small. The bruises are not small. Police now move for charges. Conspiracy, misconduct, accessory. Whatever fits the evidence. Because even if he did not drown her, the looping camera is a rope tied to the whole act. Still, the leader remains free, and the leader is the one who seems to think in rituals, in messages, in power. So the question remains, if the leader is the architect, what will he do when he realizes that people around him are starting to talk? Police set surveillance on the colleague, on the ex, on known associates. They watch for contact. Because leaders return to loyal followers. They can't help it. They want reassurance. They want devotion. They want to reassert control. One evening, the colleague leaves her flat and walks without purpose, or with purpose disguised as wandering. She makes turns that don't make sense. She checks windows. She pauses at a bus stop and doesn't take the bus. Then she goes to a public phone box, rare now, almost forgotten. She lifts the receiver, dials, waits, hangs up. Police can't trace the call, but they can trace what happens next. 2 hours later, a man appears at a cafe. He sits in a corner. He orders tea. He does not drink it. He watches the door. When the colleague arrives, they do not embrace. They do not smile. They speak as if they have rehearsed what not to say. Police record it all. They can't hear words, but they can read body language. The leader is tense. He is no longer calm. He is calculating. He leaves first. He doesn't go to a station. He doesn't go to a taxi rank. He walks into a crowd. Police follow. He changes pace. He takes a side street. Then another. He is good. He has done this, but the surveillance team is better. They converge. And when they finally take him, he does not fight. He looks almost relieved, as if the chase was exhausting, as if the story needed an ending. In custody, he gives his name. He asks for a solicitor. He says nothing else. Now the case must become proof, not myth, not headlines. Proof. So the question becomes the hardest one. Without a confession, can police prove that the man who preached cleansing is the same man who drowned a woman in salt water and left her on the Metropolitan line? Quick recap. Here's what we know so far, and the one detail that still doesn't fit. When the coroner estimated time of death, it contradicted the most popular suspect's alibi by minutes, not hours. Who had just enough time to do it, and just enough confidence to risk it? Trials are where stories are tested, not for elegance, for weight. The prosecution builds its case brick by brick. The salt type. The purchases. The storage unit stain. The access logs. The camera loop. The receipts. The messages. And always the image. A body on the rails. Salt around her like a border. The defense does what defense must. They attack certainty. They argue coincidence. They argue contamination of evidence. They argue that the salt could be anywhere. They argue that the underground is full of it in winter. They argue that drowning evidence could be misread. They argue that a frightened witness will say anything. The court listens. The victim's friends sit behind stiff shoulders. Her family, now finally forced into the public shape of her life, hear details they never wanted. The ex takes the stand. He is shredded by questions. Why did he bring her to that meeting? Why did he not warn her? Why was his phone near the depot? He breaks. Not into confession, into grief. He says he thought it was harmless. He says he thought it was harmless. He says he thought salt was just salt. The colleague takes the stand. She looks smaller now. Not because she is innocent, because the court is a different kind of light. She tries to distance herself. She tries to make herself a follower. But followers still act. Followers still act. Followers still open doors. Followers still rent storage units. The supervisor takes the stand. He says he was paid. He says he didn't know why. He says he is sorry. Sorry is not the same as not guilty. Then the leader is brought in. He sits. He watches. He does not look at the victim's family. He looks at the jury, as if measuring them, as if deciding whether they are pure. The prosecution asks him one question he cannot dodge. Why did you buy marine salt days after the death? He says nothing. The court hears silence, and sometimes silence is loud. But even with silence, a jury must decide. And in a case built on a stage scene and a network of helpers, certainty is fragile. So the question hangs in the air. Will the jury see a ritualistic killer at the center, or a chain of coincidences that no one can fully prove? Whatever the verdict, the Metropolitan line keeps running. It always does. Trains arrive. Doors open. People step in and out. The city keeps its pace. But for those who know, the platform is different. A particular patch of tile becomes a memory. A particular sound of braking becomes a flashback. The case leaves behind lessons that no one wants. How easy it is to be unseen in a crowd. How a closed world can hide its own. How ritual language can become an excuse for cruelty. How ordinary neglect can give a killer time. And how symbols work. Because salt is simple. It is in kitchens, on roads, in tanks, in pockets. It preserves, it burns, it cleans, it corrodes. In the hands of the wrong person, it becomes a signature, a message you can carry anywhere. In the end, the victim is not a headline. She is a woman who had a flat and friends and habits. A woman who went to a meeting and thought she could leave. A woman who fell into the machinery of someone else's belief, but one thing still resists closure. Because even if police arrest a leader, even if a court declares guilt, a question remains in the echo of that station. How many people saw something that night on the Metropolitan line and decided, for their own reasons, to look away?